Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a scandal that absolutely rocked India. It's a wild story about how a single, mind-boggling number exposed a deeply flawed system, sparked a massive political firestorm, and ended up forcing a total overhaul of how the nation manages its most valuable resources. This is the story of Colgate.
And it all started right here, with this absolutely staggering figure, 10.67 lakh crore rupees. Just to give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, that was over 200 billion US dollars back then. So when a draft audit report with this number got leaked to the media, it hinted at a potential loss to the country so huge it was almost impossible to wrap your head around. This was the match that lit the fuse.
So you have to ask, how does that even happen? How does one single, and mind you contested, number from a government audit report spiral into a full-blown political crisis, trigger major court cases, and ultimately force a fundamental change in national policy? Well, that's what we're going to unpack.
To really understand this, we need to follow the trail. It's a path that starts in these quiet committee rooms where incredibly valuable coal blocks were just handed out, then it moves to a bombshell auditor's report, and it all ends with a Supreme Court verdict that, well, it changed everything. Let's start with the system itself.
Okay, first things first. To really get what went wrong, we have to understand the system that was in place for more than 15 years. And let me tell you, it was not what you'd expect for something so valuable.
And that right there, that's the absolute key. For years and years, there was no competitive bidding. So instead of an open market where companies would have to bid against each other for mining rights, a government committee just had the power, the discretion, to allocate these coal blocks to whomever they chose, both public and private companies.
And here's how simple that old process was. A company would apply for a block, some committee would review the application, and then the ministry would just allocate it. The whole system was built on discretion, not competition, and it really lacked any kind of real transparency.
So for over a decade, this kind of quiet, under-the-radar process just kept chugging along without much notice. But that all changed when the National Auditor, the Comptroller and Auditor General, or CAG, dropped an absolute bombshell of a report.
So, 2012 is when it all just blew up. It kicked off with that media leak of the massive number from the draft report, and that, as you can imagine, caused an immediate uproar. By the time the final official report was actually presented in Parliament, the political stage was already set for a huge confrontation.
Okay, and this slide right here gets to the very heart of the whole numbers controversy. See that huge leaked number? That was based on the total estimated coal just sitting in the ground, what's called in situ. But the final official report, it used a much more conservative method, counting only the coal that was actually extractable. That difference brought the figure down a lot, to 1.86 lakh crore rupees. And understanding that difference in methodology is really crucial here. And this is where our really important term comes into play. The CAG, the auditor, wasn't actually calculating a direct cash loss for the government. No, their report was focused on something they called a windfall gain. Basically, the massive financial advantage that companies got by getting a precious resource for way less than they would have paid in a competitive auction. Now, the big fight over that CAG report in Parliament was really just the beginning. The whole issue quickly moved out of the political arena and straight into India's highest court, where the legality of the entire process was about to be decided once and for all.
And you know, what's so interesting is that it wasn't the government or even the opposition parties that forced this final showdown. Nope, it was civil society groups and activists who took the case to the Supreme Court. They argued that the whole discretionary system was just fundamentally unfair, arbitrary, and, well, illegal.
And then, in 2014, the Supreme Court delivered its historic verdict, and they did not mince words. The court declared that the entire allocation process that had been followed for years was, and I'm quoting them directly here, illegal and arbitrary. So what happens when the highest court in the land says the whole system is illegal? Well, the consequences were swift and they were stunning. In one single judgment, the Supreme Court canceled pretty much all of the coal block allocations made under that system. We're talking around 204 of them. It effectively just wiped the slate clean. So, with the old system completely dismantled and hundreds of these allocations just gone, the big question was, what comes next? And this, of course, led to a complete overhaul of the nation's policy on natural resources. So what followed was this mix of reform and, well, reckoning. On one hand, a brand new policy based on transparent, competitive auctions was put into place. But at the same time, the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, kicked off years of criminal investigations into specific deals, which led to arrests and charges. although many of these legal cases have just dragged on and on.
And really, when you boil it all down, that is the lasting legacy of Colgate. The whole scandal forced this fundamental pivot. It exposed the deep, deep flaws of a system based on personal discretion and pushed India decisively towards a more modern, transparent auction system for its precious natural resources.
And that kind of brings us to today. The policy has been reformed, that's for sure. But with investigations still going on, and many, many court cases yet to reach a final conclusion, you have to ask, is the story of accountability for Colgate really over? The final chapter, it seems, is still being written.